So in this video, we will look at the first component of the aggregate demand, consumption. So keep in mind, after we look at the component of aggregate demand, our goal actually is to see how this component actually going to affect our aggregate demand curve, how they are changing going to affect our aggregate demand curve shifting. So first, since we look at the consumption, let's know how we define the consumption. So the consumption is the expenditure by consumers on final goods and the services. So here, the final goods and services shouldn't be unfamiliar with you because I emphasize final goods many times when we discuss the GDP. So when we talk about consumption, we are not looking at the intermediate goods. So we only look at the final goods, which means after the people consume the final goods, the goods is gone. So no one else can keep using these goods to making more product. So if that's the case, that would consider as intermediate goods instead of final goods. So when we talk about consumption, it is only related to the expenditure by consumer on final goods and the services. So being a consumer, we're always making the consumption decision. So the money we spend by food, by cars, all considered as the consumption we talk about here. So since we talk about consumption, and we need to understand in the United States how it look like. So about 2/3 of the total spending actually is coming from consumption. Do you remember we have 4 components? Only just for this consumption, it take over 2/3. So 2/3 is huge portion. So that's not a surprise. We starting by discussing the consumption before we discussing other 3 components. So now, in order to understand the consumption, we have to understand what actually affect the consumption. At the beginning of this chapter, I already mentioned about there is a very important component affect your consumption. That is your income. So that is your income. So actually, based on what Keynes proposed, and so he actually believed the consumer tend to spend most of whatever income they received. So that is the relationship. So that's like you have to have money before you can consume. And so some still might see that maybe not the case. So we talk about the society that very original society that we don't have the credit system yet. So in order to consume, you have to first of all have income. And so now we have to look at what is the relationship between the consumption and income. And so first, consumers tend to spend most of their disposable income. So keep in mind the disposable income we used YD. So Y is income and the subscript D means disposable income. So that is the income remaining after tax. They save the rest. So to summarize what we see here is, so when people have income, generally speaking, after they paying the tax, so the rest of the income can have 2 functions. So the first function will be consumption, and the second function will be saving, so which is disposable income not spent as consumption. So in another term, we can use equation to find relationship between the disposable income and consumption and saving. So that is the disposable income equal to the consumption plus saving. So no question, right? Very good. So now for the next couple of slides, what we're actually going to discuss is, so what's the relationship between the income and the consumption, and what is the relationship between the saving and also our income, and the saving and our consumption, saving and our consumption. So we all focus on our consumption. So first, we're going to look at what is the relationship between the income and the consumption. So before we start to talk about it, so many of you might already think, okay, so that means actually I understand it already. So the more income you have, the more consumption you will make. So I don't see you're wrong. So you're right. But we want to know more about this relationship. So beyond increasing income, increasing consumption. So what are the things we have to know? So we're going to look at our consumption function. So the first one thing I want to remind you, in this chapter we have so many formulas, so it would be a good idea you have a piece of paper, write down all the formulas, because that will help you on your homework and also when you're taking your exams. So talk about the consumption and income relationship. The first ratio we will learn is called the APC, which is called the average propensity to consume. So before we look at how we calculate this ratio, and I want to ask you a question or ask you to think about this scenario. So let's see, for instance, me and my friend Sarah find a job after graduation from PhD. And we both find the same type of job and earn the same amount of money. So let's say, let's make it good, $100,000 a year. So if that's the case, $100,000 a year, I know it's a real lot. I agree with you. So I don't get that much actually. So let's say, for me, I'm kind of like, I may have more kids in the future. I'm considering that, and then I wanna not spend all my money. So what happened is, for this $100,000 a year, and based on this salary, I bought a very cheap house, but it's good size so that I can raise more kids, and I bought a decent car, the Honda CRV SUV, so it's not that expensive. And then I don't buy very expensive organic food, so I buy the regular food. So I just try to have some extra money after I receive my salary, buy all those goods. And for my friend Sarah, she is different, and she's single, and she never think about her family. She just try to enjoy her young life, and her decision is, okay, I have $100,000 a year. So first of all, what she did is, after she finished her first year, and so during this first year, what happened is she bought a very expensive car, a very expensive BMW, the racing car, and cost almost $60,000. And then she decided to buy a very expensive house, and the down payment is $50,000. So then you can think about how much the house is. And then she buy luxury food. She never cook in the house. She spent. So at the end of the year, she had nothing left. So think about two of us. We all earn $100,000 a year, but obviously our total consumption behavior are different, which means the way we contribute to the GDP is different. So first of all, you understand that actually, compared with Sarah, during that year, Sarah actually contributed more GDP than me because I didn't spend all of my money. So how can we compare these two consumers' consumption behavior? Or if we try to make this analogy bigger, talk about two nations. So how can we understand the different consumption behavior of a nation? So that's why we create this first ratio is called the average propensity to consume. So that is the total consumption in a given time period divided by the total disposable income. So we create this ratio. We are trying to look at, for each nation, how they are using their disposable income. Are they trying to use all of them? So think about, if a country use all of the money, so you will see if they use all disposable income, and so they will end with APC equal to 1. So that means this country the people in this nation have no hobby to saving. So if we have so many people save their majority of their income instead of consume it, so this APC should be relatively small, far away from 1. So that means that nation are very like saving. So look at what happened in US. In 2013, so US consumer had an APC of 0.951. So after you understand how to calculate the ratio, and you should be able to understand what this value means, 0.951, which is very close to 1. So which means the people living in the US, the consumer, if they earn $1,000, they actually will spend $951, and they will only save $49. So they save only 5 cents out of each dollar of disposable income, which is, no, it doesn't consider that as they are really saving. So if we really look at the same ratio for China, you actually can find a totally different number. So Chinese people is really love saving, and I grew up in a traditional Chinese family, and I'm a big saver, so I don't spend all my salaries. I save it, and for the sake of my future plan for my kids for college, etc., I will never use all my income. And I also see how my parents saved, so they literally spent like 5 years super save for my college and also save for my college expense, accommodation, and they even try to save for my study abroad. Luckily, I got my full scholarship, so I didn't really ask them to pay my education after my when I was in my graduate school. So that's a good thing. So you can see why we needed this APC. It's really important for a nation, especially for the government policymaker, to understand the shopping behavior hobby for a nation. Because you can see when we had 2008 financial crisis, so if nobody have any savings, so they don't have any cushion to facing that financial crisis, they lose job, and if the bank is not running well, the government not running well, and people is suffering. So saving is not a bad thing, and especially when people are in the lower income. So it's very, very important they know how to save. So many things you don't have to buy. You have one clothes is good enough. You don't need two clothes, right? So just try to save. That will really help you when you are in the difficult times. So this is the first ratio to discussing the relationship between the consumption and income. So the consumption and income. And so the next what we will look at is another way to measure the relationship between the consumption and income. It's called MPC. So this is the fraction of each additional marginal dollar of the disposable income spent on consumption. So how to interpret this ratio? So this ratio is totally different from the APC. So first of all, you look at the calculation. So the APC, you're using your total consumption divided by your total disposable income. But for the MPC, you're using the change in consumption divided by the change in disposable income. So why this ratio is so important? So think about people's income is not always the same. So they are not constant. So the income is changing, fluctuating. So sometimes because you are doing a good job, you get promoted, so you get more income. Or sometimes you are doing a bad job, and so you are losing your bonus, so your disposable income will go down. So your income fluctuating all the time. So for this ratio will help people to understand by increasing certain amount of income, how will that help to boost the consumption? So now at this point, you will say, wait a second, seems like this ratio will be very useful for the policymakers. You are right. Because one of the policymaker can do is, do you remember our tax? So our disposable income is affected by your income and tax. So if we pay less tax, so that means you will have more money to purchase. So your disposable income will increase. So by doing that, and if you know the MPC, the marginal propensity to consume, you actually will be able to understand if government have tax cut, the income tax cut, and how will that help to increase the consumption, so that it will help to boost the economy, because GDP, part of the GDP, or 2/3 of the GDP is coming from consumption. So actually it will help to boost the economy, right? So this ratio actually is very, very important, especially for government to making the policy, try to help to increase people's disposable income. Knowing the MPC will actually allow them to understand to forecast what is the impact of those policy. So as we see, as MPC is not as high as APC, since consumers do not respond to the next dollar earned in the same way as they did for past dollars. As income rises, more saving can occur. So more saving can occur. So this is a relationship between MPC and the APC. So after we learning these two ratio and you understand why we need to know, so the APC is more like stating about what is the current situation for each nation. For the MPC, it will be very useful when we talk about policymaker try to increasing the disposable income. We can very easily using this MPC to predict what's the impact of those tax cut or tax hike. So that's very easy to understand. So next, after we know this two ratio is not done yet, we have to understand what's the relationship between the saving and consumption. So to understand this relationship, we're going to learn our third ratio. It's called the marginal propensity to save. So this is the fraction of each additional, or called marginal, dollar of disposable income not spent on consumption that is saved. So the MPC and MPC and MPS has a relationship. As we know, disposable income equal to the consumption plus saving. So if we go back to this one, our initial equation we saw here on the bottom, if both sides divide by our YD, so divide by our disposable income, and you will find, so 1 equal to the MPC or the APC minus the APS, right? So the APC plus APS equal to 1, so that's why the APS equal to 1 minus APC. So that's how we get our equation seen here. MPS equal to 1 minus MPC. So MPS equal to 1 minus MPC. And so since added the disposable income is either spend or saving, so MPC plus MPC plus MPS. So there is a typo here. Sorry for that. I will change. So our MPC plus MPS equal to 1 always hold. So this is our fourth equation we learned from this class. So keep in mind it's very important.